Under the colorful neon lights, two married men and women met and walked into a hotel. Just as the two were preparing for their next move, a gangster suddenly broke in with a gun. The man never expected that he would encounter such a thing when he betrayed his marriage for the first time. The robber reminded Carl that he must remember to lock the doors and windows when coming to a place like this. Carl was about to fight back when he was punched to the ground by the opponent. The two did not dare to neglect and hurriedly handed over their wallets. They thought that the gangster would leave after taking the money. Unexpectedly, the gangster did not leave. He not only robbed money but also robbed sex. He also dragged the woman over and caressed his face back and forth obscenely with the pistol. Carl couldn't stand the gangster's dirty behavior, so he rushed up to fight with him. As a result, because he was not good at fighting, he was beaten all over by the gangster and collapsed to the ground. Susan on the side took the opportunity to run towards the door, but her speed was too slow and she was thrown onto the bed again by the robber. Carl listened to Susan's cry for help and slowly passed out. When he woke up again, the robber had already fled, leaving only the woman sitting disheveled by the bed. The man's first reaction was to call the police, but Susan was worried about damaging her reputation and stopped him. After this incident, the two of them lost interest. They parted ways, thinking that was the end of the matter. As everyone knows, this is the beginning of the nightmare. Carl is a senior director of an advertising company, and his wife is a middle school teacher. Their daughter suffers from severe diabetes, and long-term treatment requires a lot of money. Financial pressure has made the couple lose their former passion. This gave Tal the idea of cheating, but no one thought that his entire family, or even his whole life, would fall apart because of this affair. A man went on a secret date with his wife behind his back, but was beaten beyond recognition by a robber who suddenly broke in. Afterwards, the two were afraid that their affair would be exposed and did not dare to call the police. The next day, Carl, whose face was covered with injuries, returned home. When questioned by his wife, he lied that he had met a robber on the road. He thought that the matter would be over. Unexpectedly, the thug was so greedy that he called the house and frightened him. Decker was confused. It turned out that the gangster found a photo of Carl and his family of three in Bill's wallet, so he guessed that he and Susan were not married, so he asked for $20,000 in hush money, otherwise the scandal between the two would be made public. Carl immediately found Susan and said unbearably that he wanted to call the police, but the woman still disagreed because he would be forced to divorce and his daughter's custody would also be taken away from him. In order to appease Carl, Susan took out the $10,000 she had prepared in advance to share half of the extortion costs. Unable to bear it, Carl wavered. He didn't want to see the other person's reputation ruined, so he gave up the idea of calling the police again. Moreover, he didn't ask for Susan's money, saying that he would find a way. After much hesitation, he misappropriated $20,000 of working capital from the company's account. He thought he could finally settle the matter this time, but it didn't last long. The robbers called again. This time, the lion opened his mouth and demanded directly $100,000. The penniless Carl refused, but unexpectedly his wife's voice came from the other end of the phone. The man returned home anxiously and saw that the robber pretended to be his colleague and talked to his wife. Obviously, his purpose was only money. Desperate, Carl had no choice but to find his lawyer friend, who said that there was no police record when the incident occurred. The only way now is to have Susan come forward to testify. At his wit's end, Carl found the woman again and discussed calling the police, but Susan revealed that she had an unintended pregnancy and miscarriage due to abuse. She suffered great mental and physical pain, and she still can't get out of the shadow of that pain. Carl expressed his understanding, but a deep sense of guilt came to his mind again, so he once again gave up the idea of calling the police, but his heart could not calm down for a long time. Just because $100,000 was not a small amount, and the depressed Carl came, he went to the bar to drink away his sorrows, and accidentally told his colleague Charlie the whole story. Charlie used to be a street gangster, and he made it clear that gangsters bullied the weak and feared the strong, so he volunteered to vent his anger on Carl's behalf. In this way, Carl brought Charlie to the trading location. Unexpectedly, Charlie was shot in the head by the opponent before he could use it. Carl was so frightened that he froze on the spot. In order to avoid getting angry, he panicked and took Charlie's body together with him. The car was pushed into the river together, and the fingerprints were wiped off and they fled. However, early the next morning, Robert, a police officer, came to Carl's office to investigate the cause of Charlie's death. But at this time, the gangster called again, claiming to have kidnapped Susan and asking him to send $100,000 immediately, otherwise his wife and daughter would not be able to escape the relationship. Carl understood the cruelty of the other party and did not dare to delay for a moment. He reluctantly took out the life-saving money prepared for his daughter and went there. The man burned himself while playing with fire and took his daughter's life-saving money behind his wife's back to save another woman. The gangster released Susan as agreed. Afterwards, Carl, who was speechless in front of his wife and daughter, came to the bar to get drunk. At this time, Detective Robert came over again. He investigated and found that Charlie had met Carl the night before the crime. As his uncle, he decided to bring the murderer to justice. Before leaving, he did not forget to leave his business card and asked Carl to go to the police station for questioning tomorrow. Charlie's death was a sting in Carl's heart. After much thought, he finally came to his senses. Only by calling the police and telling the truth could everything come to an end. So, he came to Susan's company again, trying to persuade him to go to the police station to confess all the consequences. Unexpectedly, the company's planning director was not the Susan he knew at all, but the woman he knew was named Anna. She was a temporary assistant hired by the company and had resigned last week. Carl was completely confused. She hurried to the apartment where Anna lived and found that the place was already empty. She learned from the landlord that the last tenants were a man and a woman, and the photo in the brochure of the house was exactly what Anna had given him. See the so-called photos of my daughter. Carl suddenly realized that he might have been involved in a partnership fraud. In order to get back his daughter's life-saving money, he began to search frantically for Anna's whereabouts. Finally, the hard work paid off, and I saw the man who was repeating his old tricks at the train station. Apparently he had found a new prey. Immediately afterwards, the scene of Anna and the robber embracing made Carl feel like a knife. It turned out that the two were lovers. Carl immediately called his lawyer friend, but the other party said that even if the money was recovered, it would be confiscated as government affairs. For this reason, Carl chose to take risks. She arrived at the small hotel in advance and waited. Through observation, she discovered that the security guard here was actually with them. While Anna and the prey walked into the room, Haya followed closely, knocked the robber unconscious to the ground, then dragged him into the room, told the man that it was all a scam, and threw out the photo of the brochure. The man didn't want to lie in this muddy water, so he took the key and prepared to leave. Carl knew that there were fellow security guards squatting outside, so he immediately threatened with a gun and threatened that no one could leave the room. At this time, the gangster on the ground woke up and said that Carl was the robber. The man on the side believed it to be true and couldn't help but want to take the gun from Carl's hand. Unexpectedly, the gun went off and killed Anna on the bed. The gangster took this opportunity to take out another pistol from his body and fired wildly at Carl. Unexpectedly, the man in front of him received the lunchbox. When he wanted to shoot, there was no bullet left. The police who received the report arrived at the scene. By this time, Carl had quietly returned to the guest room. The police only briefly questioned him and finally speculated that the man and woman who checked into the room were robbed and shot. Carl pretended that nothing had happened and came to the front desk to check out. He accidentally saw a briefcase with his name on it, so he went to claim it with his ID and found that the $100,000 he had been defrauded was every penny. In this way, Carl became the final winner with the halo of the protagonist.